At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Jeremy Haselwood, welcome to the show.
Cool. Thanks, Dr. Doug. So happy to be here.
Hey, it's good to have you on the show. I always find it fascinating as people are writing different books and what becomes the motivation behind that. But I'd love for you to share with the audience, who are you? Kind of that quick little bio of who you are, but then get into the story of what aha moments you had in your life as you have been doing various things to where you decided to write this book and to do some of the other things that you're doing right now.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm Jeremy Haselwood, live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm a two-time best-selling author and marketing consultant. And my journey has been one of just figuring things out. I moved to Atlanta when I was 20 years old, really with this dream of making it in the music industry, and that didn't pan out, which I went pretty strong into almost 30 years old. And then I was like, priorities shifted, had a son, relationship, and I decided it was time to do something different. And this kind of gets into answering your question, like that aha moment, and really looking at everything that I did with music, like creating, producing, writing, performing. But I wasn't doing that anymore, but I felt like these were gifts given to me. So what do I do now? And it's not like it was all of a sudden it came to me. It was a few years of trying to figure myself out and saying, hey, I want to start connecting with people in another way. Hey, let me write a book about my journey and the tools that I use to really help me tap into my purpose, my talents, and that can help other people. So we can unpack a lot of our discussion today. That's really like the short Cliff Notes version.
Okay, good. And you talk, the latest book that you have is Finding Your Edge, How to Unlock Your Talent and Purpose. And I find that a fascinating title because when we talk about talents, when we talk about purpose, have you found that in many cases people just go through life really without ever having discovered their purpose?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's unfortunately a majority of people. And I'm not saying an overwhelming majority, but if we were looking at a scale and a 50-50, I do think there's more people that haven't unlocked and discovered that purpose than people that have. And I think part of that is just the culture of the society and how we're, raised. And it's like you work, you get it, or you go to school, you get a job and you work for a living. And that may or may not be connected to your purpose. You have these talents that you haven't really nurtured, and the work and the job that you're doing may not necessarily be your purpose. It's a means to an end. And we get so locked into routines that we don't really step outside of that to discover who we are.
Well, and when you talk about purpose, what immediately comes to my mind, and as you were talking about, doing this and doing that, I came with a family of, there's 5 boys and 1 girl in our family, and
Wow.
and it was interesting because as we started to look at our purpose, it was heavily focused, if we were to call that our purpose, of what my dad said, you'll all be professionals. And so, we all went to professional school one way or the other, and that became our purpose. Is we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then I've thought about that and thought about, it seems like oftentimes we say, this is my purpose, when it's really, this is somebody else's purpose that has been imprinted on you, and it's not really your true purpose. So here's the question for you. How does one discover what their true purpose is? And that's number one. And number 2 question, and maybe it should go before that, is why is understanding your purpose so important in your opinion?
Yeah. Wow. Like, I already love where this conversation is going, because these are the topics and the kinds of combos I can have all day. So thank you for asking those questions. I think, how does one find their purpose? It's not externally, kind of like what you were alluding to. A parent, a friend, a teacher can't say your purpose is to do this, because they're not you. They're outside of you. And they may see some gifts. They may see areas in which you excel and things, attributes that they may deem to be your purpose. However, you have to really do the work inside yourself. And it takes stillness, it takes focus. And that's why I think so many people don't discover their purpose, is because they don't take the time to do the work. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do what I do and talk about purpose and really lock into what I believe my purpose is if I didn't do the work. And for that, and I talk about different things that you can do in my book. Now, I do think that it is important that you consult with people who do know you, because sometimes they can bring something to the surface that you may not necessarily have seen. So if there's a parent or teacher or somebody in your life, a friend, it's like, hey, you're really good at this. And you don't necessarily think you're good at it because it's just something you've always done. It's a natural gift. And you live within your skin every single day. So you don't recognize this as something that you excel at more than other people do. And sometimes it does take an external person to recognize that and, in a sense, be a mirror. And there may be something there. However, there's different assessments you can take, like personality tests, just to learn a little bit more about yourself. And an assessment is not going to tell you your purpose. It's really like a data point. It's emotional intelligence and learning what you're good at, your attributes, what makes you tick, even looking at how you were raised and maybe trauma that you survived or went through and the resilience that it built up in you. And what can I do with that? How can I serve others with the gifts that have been given to me? So I'm not going to say there's a silver bullet. Here's exactly how you do it. It's like I can point you in a way to do it. And along this way, you're going to fall into and discover what that purpose is for you. And it's going to take time. You don't just wake up and say, I've got it. It takes a little bit of time. Yep.
Well, and, as you talk about personality profiling, and I actually am certified as a behavioral analyst, and I use a very specific one, and you may be familiar with it, but it's what's interesting about it is it doesn't. I think most people when they do a personality test, they're either right brain, left brain, invert, that type of thing. But there are some behavioral analyses that really get into what's your motivator, what are your true values. And all of a sudden, things open up a little bit. And I apologize if there's a little bit of noise because we got somebody mowing the lawn out front.
Yeah, it's all good.
So one of the questions that I have is, how do values, and when we talk about values, again, we get into, is it other people's values that have been imprinted on you, or have you discovered your own true values? But how do values relate to purpose, number one, because you mentioned values. Number two, how do talents relate to purpose in your experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually an interesting question. And I haven't thought about it in that way, but I do think that values, what you believe in, how you were raised, and I tend to lean more towards talents. And as you were talking and explaining values and talents, like kind of the premise of my book is like, I believe that your purpose can lie at the intersection of your talents and your passions. But I do think it's an interesting, play to say, what about your values? Because, you can have a talent, but maybe your values don't necessarily align to where that you care about society or care about your impact. And a lot of people weren't necessarily raised with certain kinds of values. Maybe they didn't have a parent who attended to them in a way that they needed to be. So it doesn't make them a better or worse person. Just their values may not be the same as somebody, what would be considered like the generally accepted values. But that all kind of creates who you are as a character and what your personality is. Your talents are something that I don't necessarily think are shaped by values. These are natural gifts that you are given. And I think once you dig into what those talents are, like, for example, like I have a talent with spreadsheets, but I don't like spreadsheets. I despise spreadsheets, but I have a talent there. So I'm not going to say that my purpose has anything to do with spreadsheets, but, I have a gift to connect with people. I have a gift to instill hope and to speak and to write. And these are the gifts that I nurture. And, when you talk about values, like I think about how I was raised, and I was product of divorce, but there was still a lot of love between both of the households that I grew up in. And that really shaped me who I am. And I had good friend groups. I come from a small town in Oklahoma, so it's a lot of community. So a lot of this did shape who I am and the way that I care about people. But that's not to say if I was from a busy city that I wouldn't have similar values as well.
Okay, and I was not meaning to suggest that values equals talents.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's
It's a good
entirely different.
conversation.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think that values, and perhaps the way you're talking about it is our talents can give us an idea of the type of purpose that we can get involved in. And of course, you have
Mhm.
different types of purposes. You have purposes of where am I going to work? How am I going to support my family and so forth? Then you have a
Mhm.
life purpose and discovering
Right.
what that might be. So I think
Mhm.
that's interesting. But talents absolutely can give us an idea of how we can be most effective in doing that. But
Yeah.
I think that values maybe reflects how we do it
Mm.
and the direction that we go. So,
Yeah.
everybody has one, but how do people begin to understand theirs? I know that that's what your book is all about, but let's talk about that
Yeah.
just a little bit. How, number one, when people are going through life, quote, purposeless, not having a purpose.
Sure.
How many people are actually doing that? Or are you just talking about conscious purpose versus unconscious purpose? So there's 50% that
Hmm.
are consciously knowing what their purpose is, or
Hmm.
at least seeking to know, whereas those are
Yeah.
not. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, the book is called on how to find or is finding your edge, how to unlock your talent and purpose. And edge is actually an acronym, and it kind of answers what you're talking about here. Because how does one start that journey to find their purpose? And so walking through edge is is eliminating distractions, discovering yourself, generating goals, and then enacting discipline. So if I was to say, how do you start to tap into and find your purpose? It starts with eliminating distractions. It's just hushing the noise. It's recognizing, it's creating that intent and that stillness to be able to focus on yourself and to start to move into the discovering yourself. Because if you're not even at a place of stillness where you can do the work, you can take the assessments, uh, journal, meditate, pray, and really take time with yourself. If you don't create the space to do that, then I don't believe that you're really going to latch onto your purpose. Part of that is because distraction is so prevalent, especially nowadays. It's only gotten greater over the years. One thing I talk about is like we have distractions that are always competing, and as technology evolves, we've come to a place where technology doesn't necessarily replace a distraction; it adds on to it. So if you think about like the olden days with the telegraph, there was a telegraph and then the telephone came along, and these were two ways to communicate. But the telephone replaced the telegraph. People weren't necessarily using both. I mean, there was a time period where people may have used both, but ultimately both of these were not a part of lifestyle. So, you move on to now we have cell phones and telephones, and now we're like, most people have a cell phone. Like, I don't know what the percentage is, but most people have a cell phone. But this now didn't replace anything. This added on. And now within a cell phone, within a tablet, we continue to add on distraction upon distraction upon distraction, like social media, news. There's so many different, it can be toxic relationships. It could be television shows. It could be food. It could be a lot of different things that are distracting you. And we find comfort in these things because a lot of people want to check out. They work hard, and when they're done working for the day, they don't necessarily want to come home and quote unquote do more work. But that work that you do on yourself can actually create a better life for you. So the path to really starting to discover your purpose is to be intentional about getting rid of those distractions. And one way that I recommend do that is like, let's write down, let's make a list, and literally, like, if you really want to do the work, like really go all in, then let's keep a log of how we're spending our day and do that for 2 weeks, like from 9 a.m. to whatever time you go to bed. And it doesn't mean throughout the day you're writing everything down, but you just want to every day be conscious of how you're spending your day. If you spent 2 hours on your cell phone scrolling or on social media, or 3 hours watching news or whatever, it's like, let's keep track. Let's be aware of what these distractions are. And then let's create a plan where we can let's find out which ones are healthy, because I'm not saying you don't need any outlet. I think it's important to have an outlet, However, if this distraction is really delaying your purpose, then that's a problem. So we need to put some boundaries around that, and in some cases, completely eliminate it.
Okay, so here's the thing that comes to my mind, and this just gets to a very basic question here. Why
Yeah,
is it so, as you say, 50-50, some do, some don't. Why is it so
yeah,
important that we discover our purpose? And
hmm
well, that'll be my first question. I'm not going to keep it. So
yeah, yeah.
why is it so important that we actually discover our purpose versus, as you say, there's 50% of the population out there in the world that are probably going
Sure.
along in their lives without ever even thinking about purpose.
hmm Yeah, I think it's twofold. One is a selfish piece. There's kind of an internal component, and then there's the external component. So selfishly, I think when you really find your purpose, you really do find a joy. You find happiness because you've actually unlocked something and discovered something, and almost a freedom in knowing who you are and what you're here to do. And when you're living that lifestyle that really supports your purpose, like you're just in a better state. Like you're filled with gratitude in a way that you may not necessarily be. I mean, and I'm not saying you can't be happy if you don't discover your purpose, because there's a lot of people that are happy but aren't necessarily living their purpose. But I do think there's some kind of freedom that comes with doing that. Now, externally, finding your purpose means that whatever gift that you were blessed with, like this is something that is supposed to be shared with the world. And it may not be the whole globe, but your world may be your community. It may be your neighborhood, but there's somebody else that benefits. Like I'm a very big believer that we're not all just put here to serve ourselves. Like there's other human beings on this earth. And I think that we're all here to have some form of community or servitude amongst each other, even if it's just the grocery store clerk at your local grocery store. It's like kindness. And that could be a purpose. A purpose doesn't have to be some big life-changing thing, but when you recognize what can you do to add to society to make something better than what it was before you were here, like that's the piece where you're creating a better world, a better environment, you're uplifting people, you're encouraging. And I mean, just think like when you get a compliment, like you remember that compliment. And it could be someone random that you never met before, will never see again, but someone said they liked your shirt or your shoes or your smile, and that sticks with you. And that's a gift. All those little things are gifts. So I think it's important to know your purpose so you can be a better human, to better serve people, and also to find the happiness that you wouldn't necessarily have if you didn't find your purpose.
Well, and as you're talking about that purpose work, a particular work direction is not necessarily your true purpose. From what I'm hearing you, it's
hmm
almost there's more of what we could refer to as kind of a spiritual sense of who am I
hmm
and what am I really here to accomplish and how am I going to touch the lives of other people? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say that. Because honestly, like, because you discover your purpose doesn't mean that your 9 to 5 or your occupation is your purpose. I think you can work a 9 to 5 that may not be connected to your purpose, but as long as outside of that, you are living that and contributing to society. Because I don't want it to be confused. Like, if you work in a factory or if you work in an office all day, like, you've totally thrown your life away. And that's not what I'm saying at all. It's like, yeah, you have this and you're supporting yourself, supporting your family. But this other gift that's been given to you, how are you finding ways to share that with the world?
Well, and as you do that, I know that in your book you talk a little bit about 5 forces of balance. What are you
hmm
trying to accomplish with that? Because I'm not sure that necessarily gives you your purpose, but as you
hmm
look at the 5 forces, is it possible that you're talking about different purposes within each of those individual 5 forces?
Yeah. No, that's not necessarily what I'm saying. I tee off my book talking about the 5 forces of balance, which are your family, your professional life, your health, your spiritual life, and then your personal life. And when you have some balance in between these, I believe it's connected to how, and this may even be going back to the earlier part in our discussion, kind of like the values, because I do think that there's values in balancing all this and how you execute your purpose. Because let's look at it like this. Again, family, professional, health, spiritual, personal. If one of these is out of balance, then you probably can't be the best version of yourself to really live the purpose at its highest state. So if your family life is wrecked, like your professional life is great, like you're making crazy money, you're getting promotion after promotion, but at home it's a mess, then in my opinion, like that's going to hold you back from really being the best person that you can be when it comes to accomplishing your purpose. Or let's say your family life is great, professional life is great, but you're just not healthy. You're not eating right. You're out of shape. You're not taking care of your health. Well, now you can't really be there for your family in a way that you need to be, even though it may be balanced now. The long term is you may have health complications. Ultimately it may affect your ability to live and to fulfill this purpose in a way that you were not intended to. It's cut short because you're not taking care of yourself. So I look at these 5 forces of balance of 5 areas of your life that you really need to pay attention to and to have balance. And I have some tools in there, like here's how you can measure it. Because I don't just necessarily say, here's the 5 forces. It's like, let's dig into each of these and let's rate ourselves on these, like on a scale of 1 to 5. How's my family life doing? And if it's a 3, how can we get it to a 5? How's my spiritual life doing? If it's a 1, how can I get it to a 3? It's just being aware of these different areas that when we're all in balance with these 5 forces, now we can actually even fulfill our purpose even better. And can you fulfill your purpose when these are out of whack? Sure, you can. But I think that there's levels where you can execute in a much better state if you have this balance within these different areas of your life.
Well, and so it sounds like there's some foundational issues that you've got to have in place if you're, as you say, as you're really accomplishing to the highest degree your purpose. Now, here's a question that comes to my mind, because I know so many, including myself, initially, how am I going to touch the lives of, hundreds of thousands of people and so on and so forth?
Yeah.
And it finally hit me, you know what? It doesn't make any difference, because what's important is just the one. Can you make a difference in one other person's life? And if that's part of the purpose, then you're accomplishing something.
Right. No, I agree with that completely. And that goes back to, like, everyone's purpose isn't to be a world changer. It might just be that one person that needs you. It may be the community. And I think when we talk about purpose, a lot of people get maybe overwhelmed because purpose is such a heavy word. It's a big word. And yes, the weight of purpose is heavy, but it's not necessarily supposed to be heavy for the whole world. It's just, let's find out what that is. And it could be something simple. Again, it could just be going back to values, like, this is what was put in me. I'm going to be kind to people. I'm going to help people find joy. I'm going to serve people. Like, I want to connect people. It could just be something very small. And it could just be for that one purpose, or for that one person. That one person. My mind wants to say purpose and person at the same time. But it's the same, that purpose for that one person whose life you're able to change just by either encouraging them or helping them. It may be more than words. There may be something physically you're helping them with, getting a job or mentoring or something like that.
So in your book, what is your book going to do for people as they start to read that step by step? What's it going to do for them in order for them to help them to achieve an understanding, I guess, of what their purpose is, number one, and then number two, actually accomplish it? Sure.
Yeah. And my book is meant to be really it's like a workbook. It's not something that you just read and set down. At the end of every chapter, I have questions for reflection. And my book is definitely something like you'll get out of the book what you put into it. So if you're just reading it, there'll be some good tips in there for you, and you'll learn some things, and you can set it aside and reflect and maybe do a few things from the book. However, if you're really wanting to change and do the work, like, you're going to participate in the reflection exercises at the end of each book. In 1 or 2 of my chapters, I have other additional questions. But really approaching this, like, this is a book that it literally can change your life. And at the same time, like, I know I'm not the only self-help person or life transformation author. And that held me back for a while from writing a book, because there's like, you can throw a rock and hit tons of people who write a similar book. So I don't ever want to be in a state of arrogance where I'm like, this book will change your life, and this is the only book that will change your life. There's many books that can change your life, but for this book, I can tell you I've lived this book, and this is what helped to transform my life. But back to continuing to answer that question, because of the way the book is laid out, the structure is there. It walks you through the EDGE model, eliminating distractions, discovering yourself. It has the different assessments that you can take and where you can take those. I don't include the assessments because I don't own those, but here are the assessments you can take. Here's a summary of what they do, and here's where you can take them. Learning about yourself, learning frameworks to generate goals, because I think if you discover yourself, if you eliminate distractions, discover yourself, that's one thing. But now what do we do? Now that I learned a little more about me, you don't just sit back and become still and go back to what you used to do before. Now we need to take some action. And that's where we talk about setting goals that align with what you learned about yourself. And then there's that discipline piece where I can create a goal, but if I'm not doing something to or at least consistently going after those goals to accomplish, then I'm still not necessarily living in my purpose, because I can know who I am, what my talents are, what my purpose is, and have goals, but none of that means anything unless we're going to take action and do it. So in my book, in that discipline piece, I talk about different ways to, just stay consistent. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of people is just getting up every day or getting up consistently and having that purpose or that goal in mind and going after it. A lot of people fall off, which is why, people that work out at a gym, like January 1st, everybody's there. But by January 28th, people have fallen off because they don't have the discipline to stick to it. So I have different tips in the book that talk about that.
Well, and do you have some stories that you could share about how people who have followed those steps in your book, how it's actually made a difference for them in their lives?
Yeah. Well, one story that I'll share is one that I shared offline with you, which was about when I was in New York one time, and I was in Times Square with a friend of mine. We were up there on business and just hanging out in Times Square, drinking coffee. And, Times Square can be really busy. People are trying to solicit tickets and all kinds of things. So this guy came up and was like, hey, I've got this comedy show, and you guys want tickets to a comedy show. And there was something about this guy. And I was like, this isn't necessarily, it was the way he talked or the way he looked. To me, I saw this guy and I saw him more than someone who's a ticket salesman. And I paused him and I said, hey, real quick. I said, outside of ticket sales, like, what do you do? What are you interested in? And he said, well, I moved from, I think it was Philadelphia. I moved from Philadelphia and I'm selling tickets, but I really want to do music, so I'm an artist, I'm a musician, but this helps me pay my bills. So I was like, yeah, there was something about like your style or the way you looked, like, it seems like there was something else that you were here for. And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, one day, I hope to make it big. And I stopped him. I said, no, hold on. I said, one day you're going to make it big. Tell yourself, say, one day I'm going to make it big, not I want to. And he's like, wow. And like his whole demeanor changed. And he's like, oh, you're right. One day I will make it. I will make it. And he said, thank you for that. And he got serious. He's like, no, seriously, that means a lot to me that you said that. And I think a lot of times we can find our purpose in just the language that we use, instead of, we kind of take the power away from ourselves when we say, I hope to do this, or one day maybe this. It's like when we can speak with certainty and say, I will do this. I am going to do this. Then we give ourselves the power and the permission to actually have that gift. And we kind of take out the loose ends and the exits of going after that goal. It's like saying, I will do something. Now you've told yourself that I'm going to do it, and you can hold yourself accountable a little more. So a lot of times it's what we can say. And there have been several instances like that from the book or from people that I've met along the way. Just like, let's correct how we talk about ourselves and what we say we're going to do.
Okay, so words are very important.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit because you're really talking about affirmations, and people do that
Yeah.
in different ways.
Yes.
But where do the words come in? And there's even a different level that comes to my mind is instead of I hope to, I am going to, or I
Hmm.
am. I am. In
Yes.
other words, you
Hmm.
get into the meditation aspect of it, and all of a sudden
Hmm.
you're as though it's already happened. So
Yeah.
I guess the question becomes, what are the words that they need to use and the phrases? What are the positive phrases? What are those phrases that they think may be positive, but in fact are negating their actual experience of attracting what they're looking for?
Mm. Wow, you've got me stumped there, because I think more about one aspect of that, which is what are the words that we can say that will position us to achieve, and that at the same time you have to have the wisdom to know that failure is possible,
Right.
but let's not speak uncertainty, let's not speak doubt. What I found even in myself is when I speak from a position of I will do this, or speak with certainty, it builds a confidence in me that I didn't necessarily have before. So when I change my words to say, one day I'm going to do a podcast, to I'm going to start a podcast. Like those are two very different. We're saying the same thing. The goal is the same thing, but one is like I'm going to versus one day I will. But when you put that certainty and like I'm going to, now it's like let's put some barriers around that and let's put some goals around that. Like when are we going to start a podcast, as an example? One thing that I found for me is been a game changer of how you carry yourself. It builds a lot of confidence to know that you're actually claiming that power for yourself. Like one example, like when I used to do music, my friend and I that I did music with, we had a show that we were doing down in Florida, and our manager up here in Atlanta, he's like, hey, like, we're open up for, at the time they were a pretty good sized group. And our manager's like, hey, just go in there. Like, you're already stars. Just act like it. Just act like you're stars. You're no less than, you're not a local artist. You're not independent. Like, you're a star. Like, carry yourself, walk in, work the room like that. And that's who you are. And just to have someone say that over me, because in our minds, we can create so much doubt of who we're not. And we discount and disqualify who we are not, as opposed to really looking at who we are. And no, we were not stars. However, that's the goal that we were going after. So we're going to present ourselves in a way of confidence and like we've been here before. This is not brand new to us, which it wasn't. But when we start comparing ourselves to others, then we start to look at ourselves like we're not good enough or we're not as good as them. But it's like you're exactly who you're supposed to be, and just have the confidence that you were created in a way that this is your journey, this is your path, and it's not everything that you're not, it's everything that you are. Because those people who are quote unquote stars, they're not you either. And there's parts of you that they would be envious of if they really got to know who you were.
Well, that's true. And as you talk about the words, what comes to my mind is how we can literally sabotage ourselves just by the phrases or the words that we're using, the self-talk as well as the
Yes,
affirmations and
yes,
those type of things. How
yes.
important is the expression of gratitude in realizing those affirmations? What are your thoughts on that? Because I hear that a lot. What are your thoughts about the gratitude part?
Yeah, I think gratitude is what keeps you grounded. For me, like my practice, like I pray every day throughout the day. And even at the end of the day, I just reflect back and give thanks for what was accomplished that day. I think it's taking inventory of things that happen in your life that didn't have to happen, in a good way. And even the trials that you have, it's like, I don't necessarily say celebrate, but in a way, it's like you have to honor the trials that you've gone through and have gratitude. Because even for me, like I wouldn't be where I am without trials that I perceived as setbacks, but they really set me up for something even greater than I thought. So when something bad happens, I don't, we react to it and we reflect and say, oh, this is a bad thing. I don't feel good about this. But when you distance yourself a little bit, and have gratitude for the trials or, the negativity, then you can grow from that. Adversely, when you look at things that went right, it's like celebrating your wins. Like I'm really big on promoting that, but I don't always do a good job of that myself. And so I promote it because I'm trying to get better at it. Like when I accomplish something, it's like, all right, I've done it. It's time to move on to the next thing. But I have to get better at really reflecting and celebrating the small wins. Like if I get a new client, like that's a big deal. Like I didn't have to get a new client. So let's have gratitude for that. I came home today. My wife came home today. Like somebody's wife, somebody's husband didn't come home today. You know, it's little things like that. And so it's like, let's have gratitude for just being alive. If you put your head on that bed at nighttime and went to sleep, you had a whole 24 hours that you just experienced, and not everybody did. So let's have gratitude in that.
And it changes your whole life, doesn't it? It changes your whole mental aspect and allows you to really start to accomplish those purposes, if that's correct.
Yeah, because you can wrap yourself in so much negativity, you know, and everything is bad, the sky's falling, the world's ending. But it's like, hold up. Yeah, there's a lot of negativity in the world. There's no denying that. There's some atrocities that are happening. There's also a lot of good in the world. And, you know, let's also acknowledge that if we're going to, I think life is a balance. You know, you can acknowledge the good, be aware of the bad, but your mindset and where you choose to live and put your energy, you 100% can control that. And I think you will find a little more peace, a little more happiness, and even connecting it with your purpose, like a more fulfilled purpose if you're putting your energy towards something positive.
Perfect. So as we come to the close, if you wanted to put a message together for the audience, just a short message, what would that be?
Yeah, I like to consider myself like a messenger of hope, like through the work that I've done on myself, through my book, because I've gone through things like unemployment, through following a dream and a dream not happening. But I always say, like, I followed my dream and found my purpose. So for you, the listener, I would challenge you like this week, like, what is that thing that you've been putting off? Something's been stirring inside of you, and maybe you haven't paid attention to it because of work responsibilities or family responsibilities. But what would your life look like if this week you put some time on your calendar and dug into that a little more? Maybe it's a skill that you have, a talent and interest you have. But what if you did that this week? So that would be my challenge. Let's do that. And let's find some hope for seeing what that talent or that gift can maybe actually bloom into. And that would be my advice for you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Jeremy, thank you. How do people find your book?
Yeah, they can find my book on Amazon. It's Finding Your Edge, How to Unlock Your Talent and Purpose. You can also find it on Apple Books, on Kindle. If you like my voice, I actually did the audio book. So if you don't like my voice, just get the regular old, paperback or hardcover. But it's available there. You can also connect with me on Instagram at jeremy.haselwood and LinkedIn also. So I do speaking, I do workshops. So if you're interested in connecting with me there, I'm happy to help out.
Wonderful. Well, Jeremy, thanks so much. It's been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Dr. Doug. I appreciate you having me on your show today.
Oh, you bet. And folks, thanks for listening. Hope you really enjoyed it. And this is Dr. Doug saying namaste.